our enemies, whether it's Pakistan or North Korea or China or Russia, their whole premise is that we're such a sophisticated society. We'll threaten you, we'll do all this because you are so wealthy and so sophisticated and so humane, and you won't lose any, and you're not crazy like we are. And what Trump is trying to do is say, yeah, we're actually crazier than you are. And that's his effort to ensure deterrence. And that's why he's trying to beef up strategic deterrent. There's also a story that Gordon Chang, an article that he wrote, suggesting that they are very worried that if we go into a secondary boycott, because China is buying Russian oil and we don't export food to China, they can't survive. They may be the world's greatest food producer, but they're also the greatest food importer for their 1.4 billion people. So they are doing two things, he says, Gordon. They're stockpiling food, and they are sending exotic diseases through their agents into the United States. Two researchers in Michigan were caught with vira that could infect cropland, and then they had an anonymous mail campaign to various people sending seeds in the mail that, as if they were, I don't know, just innocuous seeds, and they were invasive species that had the ability to kill crops, either through weeds, take them over, or somehow hybridization that would destroy that. And then they're, of course, buying land near farmland. They're buying farmland and other land near military bases. This all accelerated under Biden. They looked at Biden as a 4-year window into parity. They could not believe that he was president. At that point, everything followed. We had the Chinese balloon that came in. We had the open siding of China with Russia. We had China supplying a lot of arms to Iran. And their whole attitude was that the United States is in decline and we're going to just take advantage of this president because we might not ever get anybody like him again. And they might not. So I think Trump's strategy now is to do what Henry Kissinger said, that China shall not be a closer friend to Russia than it is to us, and Russia won't be closer to China than it is to us. Triangulation, and break up that alliance. And the alliance is based on the tensions between China, a potential alliance with either one of them to break them up. Russia's got it's got the largest landmass of any country, but it only has 144 million people. China has a landmass about the size of our country, but it's got 1.4 billion. So it's over 4 times the size of the United States population. And so they need territory, and Russia knows that and doesn't have enough people to defend territory. So we're trying to needle Russia about that. By the same token, we're trying to needle China about Russia. Trump is rightfully proud of his ability to get hostages back, but there's a double-edged sword to that when you show such empathy, and that, you know, it's kind of like the Romans who said, Cicero once said that, I think it was in the Proarchy, or maybe, yeah, it was in the Proarchy, he said, Civis Romanus sum is on the lips of every Roman. Wherever you go around the world, you say, I am a Roman citizen. And then you have exemption, or you have sanctity, and people will save you. Well, if you have that attitude, then you're almost inviting people to take Americans hostage, because Trump will react to it and try to negotiate them away home. Whereas Biden either didn't know they were gone, didn't care, and didn't do much. Unless they were DEI, in the case of Brittany Griner, where he left a U.S. former military service person and did everything he could to bring this African-American basketball player home, who, unlike the other person, was guilty of trying to bring marijuana into a totalitarian country where the other guy hadn't done anything. China's whole theory is that they don't have oil, they don't have natural gas. They have some oil, 6 million barrels a day or something. They don't have a lot of natural gas. They can't feed themselves. They're parasitical for scientific technology on the US and Europe, at least for a while longer, but they do have people. So their attitude is, we got all these people, let's use them. So let's send 300,000 students to the United States and make everyone a potential spy. By law, they have to report back when they come home what they found, what they saw, what they know about the United States. And let's put them on ships, and let's have the Belt and Road, the Silk Road, let's put them in every port. If you look at a map of the choke points being places in a time of existential tension, you could cut off the world's commerce. Gibraltar, in and out, Suez, Panama Canal, the Bosphorus, areas in the South China Sea. They're there. They either are they're either operating the port themselves or they're in a partnership. And they have trawlers and tankers that we've always said were dual use. It's just a way of using their population in a time of crisis. All of a sudden, China's are everywhere. And I don't think that our intelligentsia understands that. I think partly because China's given so much money, I think $500 million in the last 2 years to universities here. They flooded the zone with 300,000 students. They've brilliantly tapped into the yellow peril racism of the 19th century and said the Americans are racist. They've used DEI to say they were, part of the DEI exploited minority in American history. They do all of that, and the result is to create a landscape in which they're not treated the way they should be treated. Well, it's China. We were an ally of them in World War II. Mao was an aberration, whatever. But if we were empirical, we would say this is an existential threat to us. They hate our guts. They want to destroy us. And we have to be very careful with them because they're insidious. Well, it's waging the most ambitious counter-revolution I think I've ever seen in my life, much more fundamental and multifaceted than the Reagan Revolution. And by that I mean certain issues are now moot. He's closed the border. There is no more illegal entry. It's just a question of how do you get the 12 million that came under Biden out. We were told there would be 55,000 short military recruits because of systemic problems with gangs or drugs or competition with private enterprise. That proved to be fallacious. He solved that problem. I don't think I'd ever imagined, as somebody who spent nearly a half century in the university, that he would have them pretty much asking for compromises, and they are now culpable, and they admit they're culpable on anti-Semitism, gouging the federal government on federal grants, systemic racism on theme houses, graduation, safe spaces. So he's really caused a DEI academic revolution. As far as the war, these two wars go, the instigators or the attackers, Hamas and Russia, apparently, and their supporters feel that the war went against them and they have no rationale for the types of losses they incurred and the humiliation they incurred. So they're not really going to give up unless they can go back to their masters and say, this was worth it in the cost of benefit analysis. So I don't know where the magic point is for Putin, how far west of the Donbass and Crimea he's got to explain to his base, the oligarchs and the military, that he lost 1 million Russian casualties basically to just start out with what he had. He had Crimea, he had the Donbass, he had pretty much de facto certainty that Ukraine wouldn't be in NATO, and I don't know what he's gained for all that losses, but he apparently feels he's got to show something more. And I don't know where that magic line of a DMZ will be, but I think that's what the negotiations are. The other problem with Israel, Scott, is that they've got an existential enemy that tried to, it would destroy the Jewish state if it ever had the capability. And its patron, Iran, has been defanged. Hezbollah has been defanged. So here you have this remnant, subterranean remnant, and you've got the international community trying to say that resurrect it. You've got the people of Gaza, from latest polls, seem to want to resurrect it, and Israel can't resurrect it. And so it's just a question of what are they going to do about it? How are they going to? They've been into Gaza once, and it was I don't think it was in their interest to get anywhere near there again. But they can't leave it be, so they're in an existential dilemma, a doom loop. They can't let it be, and they don't want to go in there and run things. And so we'll see what happens, but it really hurt their efforts that the international community sort of gave a life raft to this dying Hamas cause. He's in unknown territory. We've never had a president that has pledged his presidency on the assumption that these people who were running vast surpluses with us, China, Japan, South Korea, the EU, they had a profit margin of which we didn't know what it was, but he's saying that they can still make a profit without without in a great deal of raising prices and pricing them out of the U.S. market and still pay the tariff. And they don't want to admit it, but he suggests that's accurate. He also feels that while the Wall Street Journal might say that trade deficits don't matter and tariffs are bad, then why does China and the EU and all these brilliant nations adopt the things that we're told are injurious to them? But I guess in the larger picture, what he's trying to do is square the circle. He said that he's not going to cut defense. He's not going to cut Social Security and Medicare. He's not going to raise taxes. And he's going to do all these incentives that will kick in, he thinks, before the midterm. And this is deregulation, investment incentives, lower taxes. But he's got to show some progress in addressing this $2 trillion budget deficit. And the way that he's trying to do it is very interesting. Scott Bessant said the other day that if the tariffs continue, they might get $300 billion in new revenue. The Doge people think they can get $200 billion in cuts. And Trump is going wild over Jerome Powell. But the subtext of that is we're paying $3 billion a day in interest. And if you can get down maybe a half a point or 3/4 of a point, you might save another $200 billion in annual interest. And before you know it, you've cut $700 billion from the $2 trillion, which is, 30 or 40% is pretty good, without raising taxes and without touching defense and entitlements. I think that's what he's trying to do. And that's why he's so inflamed and angry at Powell. Because Powell, on the one hand, says, in the Wall Street Journal in March and April, we're saying the stock market's not going to come back. We're going to be in a recession, stagflation, the tariffs are going to cause a trade war. You would think that as someone who agreed with that assessment, he would have lowered interest rates. And then when he didn't, and everybody said, well, things are getting better, then he didn't, you could see why he kept them, because he said he was afraid of inflation, but there was no evidence there was any inflation. It was about 2.4, 2.5. It's gone down. In January, I think the whole year, 7 months, is 2.4 inflation. So he's not consistent, but one thing is consistent. He's sort of a Merrick Garland wounded fawn. He's somebody that had been attacked by the opposition and wounded and never got over it. And too late, Powell, and all of that rhetoric, I don't think he can digest it and be empirical vis-a-vis Trump. And it's tragic because I think the economy justifies a lowering of interest rates, and that would do a lot for the deficit. And more importantly, it would get a lot of people in homes they can't afford. But I don't think he's going to do it in the same way that Merrick Garland just seemed to be obsessed with going after Trump, although in a Kendall-Stein way. I think what happened was they were very, as you said, they got ahead of their skis. They were very enthusiastic when they saw the initial evidence. They thought this would be another sign that the Trump administration is far more transparent than their predecessors. And then when they looked at the 170 names that appear in text messages, emails, court inquiries, interrogatories, there's a lot of people there. I mean, there's Leonardo DiCaprio, there's Bruce Willis, there's all these names, and we have no idea why they're there. And on a 1 to 10, they could have just bumped into him. They could have said hello. They could have seen him in a party. They could have tried to raise money with him. They could have done a business deal. Or at a 10, they could have been involved nefariously. And I think once she said that, they must have been swarmed by calls from people who say, if you release this information, I'm innocent, but I'm going to be ruined for life. I'm a donor. I know you people. Why are you doing this? And I think they made a mistake at that point and said, and backed off. And now I think they're trying to correct and say, you know what, whatever damage we do by letting the names out and letting people adjudicate for themselves the degree of culpability, it's a lot more damaging to try to keep it under wraps. If there had been incriminating information about Trump or major conservatives, that would have been leaked under the Biden administration. We know that. They leaked everything. They leaked everything about the Jack Smith, the Fani Willis. It was just like Russian collusion under the first Trump admin. They leaked. So I don't think there's anything there that's particularly embarrassing to Trump.
If you enjoyed today's video on Inner Vision, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below.